discussion format where research is like the focal part of what we're talking about, right? So you're transferring to research university. You're going to be taking classes that specifically focus on different types of research. What does that mean to you, right? And so today's topic for the chat will be, let's see, if it's up here yet. And give me one quick second. Okay. So what is research, right? And depending on your discipline, depending on your specific focus, it can mean a number of things, right? For some of us in these discussions, we're not as knowledgeable as others regarding what research might involve, right? So this is what we want to weed out with our conversation. Second question, what research interests do you have personally, right? What kind of research do you think or do you plan on or have you already started as a UCSB undergrad? What do you expect to do with your research after UCSB? Is this something that you expect could roll over into like graduate or professional school? Is this something that you could do to roll over into a career, possibly kickstart a nonprofit or develop an organization somehow or another? Um, you know, there's a lot of pathways that you could take with research. So I wanted us to contemplate that and have some kind of a discussion, right, amongst us, so we can be a little more prepared for our upcoming guests. We have guests that will be joining us Thursday of this week as well as Tuesday of next week. And so between the Onda Center and IRCA, the Undergraduate and Creative Activities Department, our conversations are going to be full of research, right? We're going to be talking about different research opportunities and what that means to you. So in order to prepare you for those conversations, to help prepare you for our guests, for you to have questions or ideas to run by them, I'm trying to have this breakout room today, okay? So one of the things that I hope you all will be able to do is kind of feed off of each other and also give each other ideas like how to properly conduct research, and maybe give you ideas that you didn't have before regarding what kind of research you had available as a student in X department, right? So I'm gonna go ahead and open up the breakout rooms. You all have the question in chat or questions to help guide you in chat. And then I'll pop in a couple of minutes to see where you're at, okay? All righty, I'll see you in a bit.
I mean, no, honestly, I don't know what specific research opportunities there are, but I just know that there will be opportunities. Yeah, once I'm there. Yeah, I'm kind of more focused on, I'm not even able to do research until I've had 2 quarters worth of work because they base it off of your GPA, but only your GPA at Santa Barbara. So I have to be there for 2 quarters before I'm eligible to do research. But so for now I'm just focused on academics, but I definitely want to do research as soon as possible.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, then you all could take a look at the UCSB FRAP page just to get an idea about some of the research opportunities that are available. But like you mentioned, just even through your courses, begin to get informed about what faculty are up to in terms of their work.
Mhm.
You know, starting to build that connection, right? And like you mentioned, grade also matters. Right? So being informed of all that makes sense. Anybody else? What are all others of your experiences with research, or what are questions or just experiences you all had with research?
We got coming in kind of late, but I hear, so I had to log out and log back in. What were you guys asking? Sorry.
What is your understanding of research? Have you had any previous experiences with research? Are you looking forward to any future research?
I want to learn what that means for me because this is all new to me. I guess I didn't expect there to be, like, I'm a Spanish major. I didn't expect there to be research in Spanish, I guess, it's new to me. Um, I'm trying to figure out what research will mean for me since this is all new to me. And but from like what we've seen and what we've been told in the classes and stuff, it's pretty interesting, I think. It's just like, because there's research in everything. I mean, I was watching a video, there's research in dance and choreography and and like sociology, feminist studies. So it's like so broad and so interesting. To me it was just interesting.
You
Yeah,
know,
that makes sense.
the cool thing about, sorry, Bertin, I was going to say the cool thing about Spanish, the Spanish and Portuguese programs, I think they're under the Center for Catalan Studies now. And so there's a bunch of different types of research studies. There's historical research, right, where you're doing like digging into archives, trying to document data from the past that might make more relevant sense today. Or, hey, here we found something that had never been discovered before. Um, that is how people found the journals and the archives that the Spanish priests were keeping during colonization, right? So you have different journals um, that have been archived, that have been put away, sometimes lost, and people through research have come across these texts, and so then it helps reshape how we understand and define history, right? So you go from thinking of the expansion of Europe from a exploration component or perspective to a colonization perspective, where you see that it was very much on purpose, right? Where the process for spreading Christianity, for spreading European morals and values was much more at the forefront than was actually thought of. So some of these journals, discuss Christopher Columbus and how he knew that his people were being killed um, by some kind of a plague, and he knew off of whatever little signs they had that that could be transferred through contamination, and he would readily give out the blankets of the folks that were dying from his boat crew to the natives, right? Therein spreading the disease. And so it wasn't casual, but it was like methodical according to some of the texts that have been found, right? So when you think about that, that repositions how people consider different types of quote unquote explorers now, right? Now they go from like, oh wow, here they were naive, just coming across things in the world, right, and then bringing them back to their native land, to they have very specific purposes in their exploration. And as a part of their exploration, they created very specific models for how they would dehumanize people and create societies in the places that of those indigenous spaces, right? So again, when we come into the university, sometimes we're like, wow, what are we going to do with my major? You know, I was doing sociology, Chicano studies. I'm like, what's that about? Like, in a very specific sense, what does that mean to me? And, you know, it started giving me interests in education. Didn't matter what Chicano studies class I took, I always kind of looked for the framing around education. So if it was like a history class on Chicanos and culture, right? How does education tie into that? Was always how I saw it, right? So that was my inclination. And little by little, that's how I knew that for graduate school, that's the area I wanted to study, the area I wanted to continue my research in, right? Specifically, it turned into the school to prison pipeline, right? I go from analyzing society, institutions at large, policies, and history, and then you start to see how it ties into some more individualized interests of your own, right? And so for you, I can see a ton of opportunity in the same manner, right? So that long-winded uh, example was kind of my attempt to try to show that um, our departments are just built off of people questioning, well, what can you do with that? Right? Because that's what research is. You're always trying to discover what else to build off of or what else hasn't been touched on yet, even when you fail, right? So I mentioned this last class. Oftentimes people can start a research study and in the process of this, they prove their theory wrong over and over and over. But in the process, they've also found out a lot of new truths, a lot of new information that can also help shape, mold, and develop whatever work that they're currently on. So, you know, I know it kind of seems a little bit like, man, what am I gonna get into? I encourage you to look at the Center for Catalan Studies in Spanish and Portuguese, and see what kind of opportunities they present to you. I know that it's across different departments, so it's not just even in Spanish. You'll be able to work with professors and departments outside.
Awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, which was, you know, one thing is potentially looking up people who have a degree in Spanish, right, or professors, and kind of doing an informational interview can help, right, where you ask to meet with them that you'd like to learn about their career pathway. You know, then you can see some possibilities. They might be able to even inform you about what the options are, you know, since they're most familiar with different fields and, you know, that majors and fields take you to like different careers. So yeah, that's something I wanted to add. Anybody else had experiences with research, even through your courses? What calls your attention?
When you're searching around for universities, right, and you're looking at Cal States, you're looking at UCs, and then people, counselors, advisors, maybe friends start telling you about research as a function of the UCs or even the Cal States. What was your first impression of that? Like, what did you think, man, I'm going to have to do research? What did that mean to you at the time, or has it changed?
I didn't really, I don't know, like consider it as like a, I don't know, I just didn't really consider research opportunities at all when I was like deciding on a school to transfer to. But now I guess I'm realizing that it's like probably a lot more important than I thought it was.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of our school for sure, and you're bound to encounter it like in your courses, right? Like even in some of the articles that are assigned, you're gonna have to become familiar, right, with uh, journal articles, right? How to read them, how to evaluate them. Has anybody had experience with that? Kind of like seeing research articles, working with research articles?
I kind of wanted to echo what Jesse said in that, like, at first, or actually at first I was aware that Santa Barbara only offered a BS in psych rather than a BA. And that was kind of discouraging to me because I kind of thought I wanted to be like a therapist. And I think a BA is probably more, a BA is usually more applicable to being like a therapist, like a counseling therapist. But as time went on, I kind of realized I didn't necessarily want to be a therapist, and I was more interested in research anyway. So that's why I ended up going with Santa Barbara. But I'm in a summer class right now, and this is the first time that I'm reading research articles. And yeah, they're kind of difficult to understand sometimes. Sorry, I don't remember what your question was.
Well, that's great. That's a great response, because part of this experience, like, even for myself, when I go back to it, I remember like getting my reading and my reading assignments, going through the articles, and like throwing my hands up like WTF, right?
Mhm.
And then one of my grad TAs was like, you know what? Go back and read some of the articles that it's citing, right? So there are some references in the article that they make to certain work, and those references, like, I wasn't getting. I didn't understand the connection. I didn't understand what they were trying to tell me. And what they told me was like, look, research is you having to read an article and read it again, and possibly have to go read an article on something related to it in order to understand the context and content of your original assignment.
Yeah.
So as a student at a research university, you might be doing more reading than you anticipate, and sometimes that might feel overwhelming because you're not used to like that amount of data processing in your brain. But the crazy thing is that you adapt so quickly. Like, I went from the semester to the quarter system thinking like, man, I'm gonna get blown away. And like a month and a half in, I found my little stride. I had friends that it took a couple quarters, and then they caught their stride. But the point is, you start figuring out, right, how your study habits are developing, right? You're not just going to be reading the material or writing down lecture notes and then regurgitating them in a test or something. Like, that whole process that we think of in education, the banking model, where like I'm supposed to give you information, deposit it in your beautiful brains, and then say, okay, I'm gonna go and withdraw it in this exam, right? And that's the process. I give you information, I extract it from you. The reality is that it's more cyclical. It's more I go, you go, right? And so you're gonna figure out that professors are gonna present information to you that you're gonna have to go out and be like, okay, how can I understand that more directly, or how does that apply to me, right? And so those are all perfectly relevant questions to go through in this process, is what I'm trying to say. It took me a little while to become okay with that, but once I figured out, okay, every once in a while, I'm gonna have to do a little extra work than I wanted to for these articles, I realized, like, long term, that was actually less work than I was gonna have to do down the road, right? So when I got to graduate school, I had already read a lot of texts that some of my peers hadn't started reading, and it gave me a certain area of expertise, right, that they didn't have. And then I would go to the area of expertise they had, and then we would start building collaborations. right? And so this is kind of how you start finding your niche too, or how you start developing different research interests so that you don't just get caught into one area, right? So don't get overwhelmed by what research might mean to you. It could be lab work, it could be crunching data in a quantitative, platform. It could be you transcribing interviews. It could be you just doing literature reviews, or it could be you doing all of that, right? But at some point, you're learning something new, so you're going to struggle. And if you just keep that perspective, then whenever this pops up, hopefully it's not as big of a stress as it might be, if you hadn't thought of it before.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm gonna switch over to another room and let you all continue the conversation. Okay.
Thank you.
Sounds
All
good.
right. See you soon.
Thanks.
Much besides what's it called, hospitality, but
Yeah. University UNR has a pretty good mining program if that's the route I want to go. So it's kind of comes down to what specific interest in my undergrad do I want to hone in on before making a decision about which graduate school I want to go to. So if I picked UCSB for undergrad specifically because two of the geology professors here do research in Antarctica, and I thought that would be an interesting place to go. Spend some time at as an undergrad, and again in grad school. So if I stick with that path, then UCSB would be where I would stay for the duration.
am I remembering correctly from your first journal that you've already traveled? So do geology stuff?
I've traveled a little bit, yeah. I've done like a 2-week or like smaller 1 or 2 week long field classes for geology.
Okay.
And then I just generally get around quite a bit and stay on the road as much as I can, which is unfortunate that I can't do that as much these days. But yeah, I think I'm probably the only geologist in this class. Maybe there aren't very many of us, so it's probably me.
What's cool about Antarctica that I just found out, and only because of the pandemic, is that it's a very limited community that's allowed to visit, right, and to conduct research. So, I mean, they're negotiating how they're going to do that during this time, because from what I was understanding was they were very hesitant to allow anybody on right now because of what that could do, right, to the ecology, the environment. But saying that to say this, that you're networked into a very unique and small community, and that might not have happened at any other university, right? Like, if it's limited in who they allow on the continent, right? Imagine how many of those people actually are around us in some direct manner or capacity. So you have an excellent opportunity, whatever kind of exploration they allow you to do, right? Because it could then allow you to become a part of that small cohesive community to then continue your research out. So just everything that you said, it's just funny because I was listening to this podcast. I was talking about how research is changing in these times, because I was preparing for this conversation, and they mentioned Antarctica of all places, right? So I just thought I'd share that with you because as far as access, right? Like, we're always wondering, how are we going to get access to not just the type of work, but the people that conduct that work, right? Because they're the ones that are going to give you access to the work, to the communities, and then you have to build that on your own. So it sounds like a really interesting future that you have going with the kind of work that I just briefly kind of came in and heard on.
Yeah, I'm pretty excited for this opportunity. I got a better shot of, getting boots on the ground in Antarctica than I do at, any other UC for sure. And, pretty much any other college in the country, maybe.
That's super cool.
Nice.
Would anyone else like to share about what their plans are for research, either while you're here or after UCSB, grad school or beyond?
Let me ask this. Go listen. I'm
You
sorry.
gotta give a little more wait time, Mario. There's like a delay with the. You gotta give like a
I-
10-second wait time.
I'm sorry, man. I'm hooked up on caffeine.
So I was just gonna say, after undergrad, I am planning to go to grad school, but before that, I want to take like some time off, like about a year or so, and within that year, I'm planning to like work as an RA or like a research associate or something that like pays so I can like sustain myself, but like also do research, because that was always my plan, was like to just be a researcher after I graduate. But now I'm kind of at a crossroads where I don't know if I want to do that or go to medical school, or now I'm considering being like a high school counselor. So like for the first time in my life, I'm like really kind of not sure about what I want to do with it, which is like perfect. Now that I'm actually in university, I'm kind of confused. But yeah, for that gap year, I want to primarily focus on research.
This is a topic that came up in our last class, actually. Someone asked, I guess for an opinion about whether they thought it was a good idea to take a gap year after university. And all three of the TAs, myself included, and Mario, were very much like pro taking that time off. So this goes for everybody, right? Like, there's nothing wrong with transitioning, obviously, straight from your undergrad into graduate school, but there's something to be said for taking that time and like finding out what you want to do, right? If you're not sure, and then B, just kind of like living life a little bit and getting a little bit more of like life experience, and maybe you'll fall into something that you didn't think about previously, right? Just kind of being open to that opportunity. I shared in the last class I graduated, like I said, with my undergraduate in biology, and I went to teach because I could teach at this private school where you didn't need a teaching license. And here I am now pursuing a PhD in education, which was never on my radar when I graduated my undergrad. So there's definitely something to be said for like just being open to those possibilities and taking that time and having a little bit of life experience behind you when you do decide to go to graduate school.
And I did something similar after my AA. I took a gap year before I transferred to a 4-year. And I hadn't initially thought of doing that, but once I went through the whole admissions process, the year I graduated from a community college, I realized that I hadn't cast the net wide enough, and the colleges where I was accepted, I at the end of the day wasn't really that interested in attending. And so I decided, you know what, just exactly what you said, Alyssa, getting a job and getting some internship experience. I was working doing outreach for my community college. And so people would make fun of me back then. And they're like, how's this internship going to roll into your UC degree? And so I laugh now because part of what I do in my research and consulting, and even in teaching this class, is outreach, retention, promotion, and that kind of all stems from my background early on in my gap year, right? So that gap year, I would sit back and I would just watch people move, see how different people, administrators, how they operated, what that arena was like. How did professors interact? What was going on with them? Like, what was their communication? What's their life like? You know, and I made an effort to get to know the campus people, because I was like, look, I'm full-time now, so you can't treat me like a student, you know, treat me like a peer. And that kind of gave me a real understanding of how they made some decisions. And then I figured out that there were quite a few that had taken gap years too. So like it helped me understand that even though I felt community college took a long time, remember I got kicked out of 3 colleges, had to restart and all that. I felt like I had done so much in such a little time that I needed for that to kind of settle and process within me before I made the huge commitment of where am I going to go and how is that going to bounce off into the next stage of my life. And so I knew that I was going to have to leave home. So I had to save money. I knew that, you know, things change. So I just used that year to really do, as you mentioned, Alyssa, try to conceptualize a future with my experiences, you know, maybe not necessarily as an academic, you know, there's nonprofits, there's other kinds of businesses and organizations that you can help and assist with research, right? People need data, they need to collect evidence, they need to present it in order to qualify for funding. And that goes for, you know, people across the board. If you're applying for money, you have to present, you know, data and research. So you don't need a PhD, you just need to know how to do it, right? And I think that that's the unique quality of all of us in this group, is that we might have folks in one major, right? Like geology, you might have folks in political science, you might have folks in film and media, and everybody conducts research slightly different, right? We follow the scientific method, the process, but maybe the methods are slightly what vary. So, you know, it's good that you all are starting to engage all these aspects of research, because sooner or later, you know, the way you define research now is going to include all of that other stuff, right? Right now, it's kind of entry to where many of you are going. You know, give you that first quarter, and then you're going to be like, wow, there's so much for me to do.
Would anyone else like to share their plans for after they finish their bachelor's degree? See, 10 seconds of wait time. It's about good right there. You got to like give them a
See, I'm
chance.
learning.
Nailed it.
Learning.
You nailed it. I learned that from Andy. He's like the Andy, why am I blanking on his last name? Diana Aria's husband. It's like the stats professor. He's like the wizard of Zoom classes.
I'm sorry, man. I graduated before their time.
He's the man. Anyway, yeah, long wait time. So we kind of nailed all the questions there. Is there anything else anyone wants to know about research that we didn't discuss?
Let me hop into the other breakout room, see what they're up to, and then I'll give you all a message before we join back, all right?
All right.
You know, practical work, you know, that's also okay, but at least you gave it a shot, right? Yeah. And, you know.
Sorry, wrong.
Is anybody else taking
with clients and things like that? And obviously research is going to be important with that, because I'm always going to have to research what are the best kind of implementations or interventions or skills for my clients, right? And also, what are the best teaching methods? I want to stay on top of that, right? I don't want to continue to use, you know, research and teaching methods from 10 years ago. I want to continue to push myself further for that. So that's always going to come in handy for me. And then also just anything I learn, right? Anything you hear on the news, I want to have an educated background and evidence for that. So yes, I am going to go on Google Scholar if I hear this new latest thing, or particular to this, you know, latest coronavirus vaccine or topic or whatever. I am going to go on Google Scholar. I am going to look at that, right? Versus just kind of reading a blog on Facebook and be like, yeah, that's my source of information, right? So for you, what do you think what do you expect to do with your research after UCSB, in your profession? What do you want to do?
May I say?
Yeah, go ahead, Rena.
Actually, I have no experience in research, and if I do it, it will be the first time. But I think, as you said, it is going to help people to get experience how to handle people in a group. Because working in a group is a very difficult thing, especially that some people do not want to cooperate and they don't want to listen. That is very difficult to work in a group. and that gives kind of experience to how handle that situation. And as you said before, it gives some experience how to think and how to solve problems, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyone else want to add to that?
I'll go. So I am poli-sci major with like an emphasis in international relations, and I'm really interested on how international organizations implement policies globally and how that affects different countries and businesses in particular, just because business is kind of ruling the world now. So I'd hope that some of the research I could do could help me. If I do, I'd like to be like an international corporations like private counsel, so companies that deal with overseas trade or production factories in different countries, and like making sure that they're following like international policies and things like that. So I'd hope the research would help kind of with that.
Those are very interesting topics. For a while, I TA'd in sociology and Chicano studies and Black studies. And the question that kind of came up across all classes, especially when we're talking about policies, was do we as a country operate as a corporation, or do we operate as a nation? And so you start to see the business approach more implemented, right, as than we had ever imagined once you start to scale back and unpack that question, right? Historically, we've always been about capitalism as far as how our country is founded, right? Look at slavery. Slavery's sole existence beyond the dehumanization of people's bodies was the capital, the value that they represented, right? And so we can talk about African slave trade history, or we can talk about current slave trades that still exist. It's about the same, right? Manipulation of the body and exploitation of the economy for that. And so it's a very, right now, so much more relevant way of discussing things because of our current administration, right? Everything is just that much more overtly operated as a business, right? And you start to see business practices where you usually saw or called it politics, right? Like the Morganization of education, right? Where you begin to buy out, to come into these programs, you sell them out for low prices, you eliminate them, and then you continue to do that over and over until you get the product that you want to sell, right? The brand that you want to build off of that. And so there's so many different opportunities for you to go at this time. And research, I think one thing that you should consider definitely is doing UCDC. Like the opportunity that could stem from that, or even a study abroad program where you can participate in some international studies on policy, reform, or, you know, so on and so forth, right? It's just, it's exponentially, it exponentially produces opportunities if you find the right platform, right? So at UCSB, you'll find opportunity, but I imagine if you join something like UCDC or some internship model of a similar sort, you'll be able to get plugged into different parts in different ways you didn't imagine.
Yeah, I definitely agree. Besides kind of learning the technical, you know, skills of conducting research and gathering information, what's also going to be really beneficial for you is, you know, once you conduct your research, once you kind of analyze all the data, how to present it, right? So going to a conference presentation or undergraduate conference presentation, you're gonna learn how to disseminate what you've learned and the analytical parts of it and the jargon to layman's terms to people who maybe aren't coming from a, you know, academic or research mind. And for you, Nicole, that might be particularly relevant if you have to talk to, you know, business people or, you know, administrative people and convince them that, you know, your stats and all your research is important and why they should listen to you, right? So you're going to gain those skills as well. If you can get into research and then present it and go to these conferences and connect with people and learn those skills as well, right? Get your network.
Yeah,
Awesome.
thank you guys. That's really helpful.
Yeah. Seems like you kind of have a very clear picture of what you want to do, and that's awesome getting started. Those of
We'll
you who
see.
don't have a clear picture, that's okay. I always like to tell my undergraduates, like, it's totally okay. You know, you're really exploring coming into UCSB and exploring research. I was in 3 different labs during my undergraduate, dipping my toes in different things before I decided what I was really passionate about. So I always like to remind you that it's okay if you don't know exactly what research or what field or whatever you want to be in, but it's important to put yourself out there and take advantage of these opportunities so you can find out what you want, right?
And it's going to develop even in your professional life, right? Like post school, you'll start to see different opportunities envelop. Like I never thought I could consult with like juvenile halls and these continuation schools, especially back home in the Inland Empire. And I've spent a lot of time doing that. And so that was an opportunity that just kind of came out of the blue, but it requires my knowledge in research or how to conduct research in order to, as you mentioned, Jessica, disseminate the proper information to the appropriate group. Now, that's changed, and recently I've gotten into contact with folks that want to do similar modeling, but with student athletes, right? So the focus goes from, you know, we're just looking at marginalized communities, people that are underrepresented, and now we have the kids that are incarcerated, right? That's one way. Kids that are in continuation school, there's a bridge in communication there that we can discuss, but now you're looking at the kids on the other side, right? The ones that have aspirations, that have some kind of a future that's been thrown their way, which is a whole other different student than the one I've been used to working with, right? I'm used to working with students that are told you don't have a future. You're not very valuable in our community or in the world, versus these other people that, hey, 1 out of 100 of them is going to end up as a professional making a ton of money in their career, right? And so the difference between them and the other 99 could be how they approach their process, right? The whole mind, body, soul, that's part of what has been developed out of all of my research, right? Research and experience has led me to come to those 3 as being something that I need to prioritize the more work I anticipate in doing, right? And so you just never know, right? And so right now, it's great if you have a vision, but even then, as long as you're prepared and as long as you have a background, opportunities can always pop up and you just never know from where. You know, it's just, it's one of those things that I wouldn't have conceptualized until I was here and I saw it working, like for other people, not just myself. Like I would see other people preparing themselves, going to workshops, and I'm like, yo, I'm just going to class, taking my butt to the library and writing the paper, because that's already taxing on my time. I'm not going to go to another workshop. But what I didn't know was that they were just getting prepared for the next step for them. And I wasn't there yet. But when I was, you know, I was the guy leading the workshops, right? Because I was working for EOP, I was working over here, and it clicks, right? So like we mentioned last class, in a year from now, how you feel about research, what your research interests are, it's all going to be different. You're going to be in a whole other mental state, a whole other physical state. And, you know, with that brings other options for you on how to approach research in your own future. I'm going to dip out, and then I'm going to try to get the larger class together for a little bit before we go until Thursday, all right?
Okay.
Good hearing from y'all. Hello. Go. Hey, Billy Jack, is that a OCC shirt you have on?
Yeah, it is. It's one of the 2 community colleges I went to. This is my trial run community college where I'm a crap student. And I went to Pasadena City College to actually figure out how to
transfer it. It's funny. Correct me if I'm wrong. Is that not the college where the coach who was on the helicopter with Kobe was from?
From OCC or Pasadena?
From OCC.
It might have. I'm not sure. I couldn't tell you one way or another.
It sounded familiar to me, and I mean, I'm a big Kobe Bryant fan, but Lakers are in the playoffs. It was just Kobe Day. All that stuff. It's like triggering me in ways that I'm trying to make associations. I saw your shirt and I was like, I'm gonna try one, see what.
I got you, Mario.
Cool. So how did the discussions go? How did y'all feel about this research discussion? How many of you had been thinking about these things or research as a concept before class? Right? How did it work out for you? So what was something that you all learned? How about we hear that? What was something that you learned from your group discussions that maybe you hadn't before?
I'll go. So Matt introduced us to the library website. And that, the community colleges I went to, they didn't have as robust of a network of journals that you can collect from. And so it seems like a UC library is definitely going to have a lot more resources and access to journal articles than a good amount of community colleges do. So I'm looking forward to digging into that, seeing what I can find.
Yeah, and we also have over 1 million printed texts in the library. They're actually working on expanding our library, housing some of those books off campus. Like we have property around UCSB, and they're thinking of having a warehouse of some sort where you can put a book on call and it's sent there, and you don't have to go all the way to campus, possibly pay for parking, that kind of a thing, because we have so many texts. And then as a UC system, right, you're able to borrow from another campus, right, do the inter-campus collection thing. And if we don't have the book, you can check through the library if any of the other sister UC campuses has it, and then you request it on loan and it gets sent to the library. All you have to do is go pick it up. It's really, I had never imagined library services like that, and they're going digital with it too. So having the online journals, right, those are subscriptions that the university pays for, that as students, if you're not on the university portal, like if you're off campus and you want access to those resources, you have to log in through the proxy, which means you have to use your university ID as well as the password to go into the library. But you have access to everything off campus. In most places, you only have access to it on campus. So we have a really good, I think, research foundation for people to go to with literature.
Yeah, and Mario, just to jump in, I am gonna film a little kind of tutorial on how to utilize the articles and databases at UCSB for those of you, and I'll just kind of post it, as well as kind of tips and tricks on how to get into research labs as a research assistant, things like that. So that's coming out for you soon.
Check it out. That video drops sometime in the next week. We will be checking the list to see where it hits at the end of next Friday. But we expect it to get over 1 million hits in the first week. We got to have fun with it. As much processing as we do with this information, right? Sometimes I always feel like, if we've had a heavy day of conversation, it's always good to kind of try to lighten things in a little bit, right? So um, Jessica actually did a video for my class, for my Ed 126 class in spring quarter, and so I know what she's capable of, and I can already tell you that it's going to be a great resource for you to have based on what she produced in the past. So yeah, definitely take her up on that offer. I know it's another resource for you to have, so it's something else that you can build from. It'll show you a little bit of one area of research, and again, it's something you can always refer back to because she's going to put it in a digital form. So thank you for that, Jessica. I know that we've been going back and forth on that, trying to figure out some specific info or message to conduct. But again, I trust that whatever you put out, the students are definitely going to benefit from. Cool. So let's see. I'm going to check the chat real quick to see. This is great. Reach out to professors that share an interest to what you want to research. That's great. And being persistent to be involved with labs. Both of those go hand in hand with graduate school, professional school, or even the career market, right? Where you're going to have to be persistent to try to get somebody to get you a letter of recommendation, to get it out on time, right? And you're going to have to be using all of these different tools that you've been developing, right? When you apply to a grad or professional school, one of the things that they suggest in your research statement is to find 2 to 3 professors to the department that you're applying to try to mention in your research statement so that they know, hey, these are the people that I want to align myself with. This is how their research topics work with my research interests. And then it helps the committee, the admissions committee, figure out whether or not, you would be a good fit. They speak to the professors are part of the committee. So when they read your personal statements, they're already trying to figure out what kind of a student / researcher you'll be based on, you already making those recommendations for your committee, right? For people you'd want to work with. So this is, again, one of those things that transfers beyond this moment. It's something that you're going to be utilizing just at different stages of your own professional or career path, right? So I think we have time for another question or comment, if any of you have it, regarding research.
I have a question. I meant to ask Matt in the breakout room, but I'd forgotten, and now I just remembered what it was. I left some research projects kind of hanging over at my community college when the COVID hit. Does UCSB care if I'm doing research with another school? Like if I went back there to kind of finish things up? Or is there like a intellectual property kind of thing? It's a weird question.
Not for me or Mario. Sorry.
It's for
Mario. Can you
answer?
I can hear. I thought that he was directing it at you, so I didn't pop in.
You probably will know better. Go ahead.
In my experience, I don't think it'll be a conflict of interest. I mean, we're in a pandemic, so you're not going to be stretched as thin traveling back and forth, so to speak, as we would imagine for you to conduct that work. So I think that as long as you're just open with your community college, right, that you're a transfer student, so you're prioritizing that transition while also trying to finish off these projects, because I imagine these projects are important for you either as a bouncing point to the next thing that you're trying to do here, or, hey, we all have professional integrity too. And we just want to see something come to an end or to some closure with this work, right? I don't think there's any issue. Sometimes there are, because depending on the work that you do, if you're being paid for that research that you're working on, the grants might be in competition with someone else over here. I don't imagine that being as complicated. That usually happens when students go from undergrad to grad school, from like a research university to another research university. But again, that would be just something that, I mean, to be honest with you, who's going to be checking at UCSB if you're conducting research somewhere else?
That's kind of, that was what I was thinking. So
Yeah, I mean, policy wise or legally, I don't assume that to be a conflict of interest for you.
thanks.
Cool. We had a really good discussion today. I know that popping into your different breakout rooms, you all were, there was a variety of conversation going on around the same topic. So it's exactly what I imagined. And hopefully you all feel a little more prepared for our guest speaker on Thursday when Micaela shows up to our class. Just wanted to remind you, I'll go ahead and share the screen with you real quickly to show you. But if you go to our class Gaucho space, you can click on Micaela's name under this week, and it'll take you to the Onda Center, right? So you can read a little bit about what the department has to offer. But here you have her direct contact info, and you can start browsing through the different categories on resources and tools that the Onda Center has for you as a transfer student. And then when we have Micaela with us on Thursday, then we can go ahead and ask her some of these questions. All right? Sound like a plan? All righty. We'll let you all go. You enjoy the rest of your Tuesday, and we'll see you back on Thursday. All right? Have a good one.
Thank you.
No problem. Bye-bye.
Bye, thank you.